Hi, I'm Luna, and this is Luna Report. A new female guard walks into one of Texas's toughest men's prisons. She's short, silent, looks more like a school librarian than law enforcement. Within days, the inmates mock her, the guards humiliate her, no one expects her to survive, but when a violent escape attempt shatters the routine, everything changes. The silence? It wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Who is she really? Why is one particular inmate suddenly begging for protection? And what's hidden in the classified folder found in her locker? Justice wears no badge, and her name is Laura Gray. What happens next? Watch Luna Report to find out. Back to the studio.
Thank you, Luna. Back to the studio. And we begin. The Texas heat did nothing to soften the mood at Black Ridge Penitentiary. Built like a concrete wound in the middle of nowhere, the prison simmered with the scent of sweat, rusted iron, and stale aggression. It was the kind of place where time crawled and mercy didn't survive past the gate. She arrived just after sunrise, young, barely over 5 feet, dressed in a perfectly pressed uniform, brown boots scuffed from real wear, and her mouse brown hair in a practical braid, no makeup, no jewelry. Her ID badge read simply Gray, L. Laura Gray. Sergeant Henning squinted at the clipboard, then at her. You sure you're not lost, ma'am? The moment she stepped into the main guard room, the tension changed from bored to mocking. Oh my God, snorted Officer Brill, a thick-necked man with a permanent sneer. Is this a social experiment or a prank? She looks like she teaches 3rd grade, chuckled another. This chick gonna break up yard fights with a bookmark? I give her till lunch, Officer Mackey muttered, loud enough for her to hear, before some lifer decides she's meat. Laura said nothing. She merely nodded at the warden's secretary and signed her forms with a pen that looked too expensive for someone so plain. By noon, the whispers had turned to laughs. She poured herself burnt coffee from the communal pot in silence while they staged their circus. She pouring coffee like she runs a PTA, someone quipped. You want creamer with that, Miss Librarian? Mackey mocked, then dropped a spoon on the ground in front of her boots. Oops! Better pick that up, sweetheart. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just walked past him. They hated that most. But the prisoners were worse. From behind bars, voices launched missiles. Hey baby, you lost? She gonna cry her first day. Bet she won't make it to Friday. In the yard, a basketball was launched at her from behind. It slammed into the back of her legs. The guards on duty didn't intervene. One even smirked. She turned, met the thrower's eyes, Mendoza, 6'3", gang tattoos crawling up his neck, and said nothing. Just stared until his smirk faltered. She wrote the incident down. No reaction, no protest. Later that day, someone smeared human waste on her locker. The stench cleared the room. She opened it, took out her gloves, cleaned it herself, said nothing. By week's end, the ridicule had become routine. The short woman in gray walking past jeers like a ghost immune to fire. But they didn't see her watching, always watching, listening, writing. The prison's ugliness had always had a code. Laura Gray understood codes. She just hadn't spoken in her dialect yet. Not yet. By the second week, they escalated. It started with Unit D, high-risk offenders. Word had spread fast. New chick's a ghost. They didn't like ghosts. They wanted blood. At 7:03 a.m., Laura entered the cell block. Officer Mackey walked with her, chewing gum like it was his job. You don't belong here, he said casually. These men, they don't give warnings. She didn't respond. He hated that. Inside, a wave of hostility hit like a heat blast. Someone screamed librarian bitch, and something sharp clanged against the metal bars. A makeshift shiv, a toothbrush melted to a point, skidded near her feet. Mackey stepped back. Laura didn't. Inmate Coltrane, a 270-pound ex-Marine doing life for double homicide, stepped forward with a predatory grin. You scared yet, little mouse, he said, licking his teeth. Laura stared at him, not in fear, not even in defiance, just stared long enough for the silence to ripple. I said, he growled, you scared? She didn't move. He lunged. In a flash of motion so precise it looked choreographed, she shifted her stance, grabbed his wrist mid-swing, twisted, and sent the giant crashing to the floor with a grunt that sucked the air from the room. One move, one breath. He stayed down. Everyone froze. Mackey's eyes bulged. What the? She stepped over Coltrane's groaning body and continued the cell check, clipboard in hand like nothing happened. It wasn't adrenaline. It was precision. She moved like someone who knew what pain was and how to deliver it with surgical efficiency. Back in the guard room, word spread like wildfire. You hear about what she did to Coltrane? They said he didn't get back up for 5 minutes. She's ex-military, right?
Nah, she's just nuts.
But she didn't speak, didn't gloat. She drank her coffee in silence, logged her incident report, and left early that day without explanation. That night, someone rifled through her locker, thought they'd find perfume, tampons, maybe a diary. What they found instead was an unmarked manila folder with only 2 words stamped in red, WITSEC classified. And under it, barely peeking from the stack, former tactical unit, U.S. Marshals. The room went silent. Mackie stared at it like it was a ghost. She was Marshal? No one spoke. But Laura, she knew exactly what they saw. And she knew someone in this prison wasn't supposed to know she was still alive. They stopped mocking her. Not out of respect, out of fear. The air changed. Men who once tossed crude jokes in her path now looked away. Guards who whispered insults behind her back now fell silent when she entered a room. But silence was never peace, not in Blackridge. It was just noise learning to hide. Then came Tuesday. A storm was rolling in, thunder cracking over the walls like warning shots. The yard was locked down early, but tension clung to the walls like oil to fire. At 2:17 p.m., the alarm blared. Escape attempt, Unit B. Sirens screamed, radios crackled with frantic shouts. The North Gate surveillance cut out, suspicious, too precise. 2 inmates were missing from count, Carlos Rivas and Anton Green, both ex-cartel enforcers, both dangerous. Officers scrambled, yelling, running, keys dropped, panic bled through the corridors. Laura walked.
Not ran. Walked swift, calm, eye scanning every angle like she'd already mapped the place in her mind.
Down the hall near Supply Corridor 4, she heard at footsteps too controlled for panic. She moved silently, stepping around the corner just in time to see Anton, shirt soaked in rain, holding a sharpened rod to the neck of a junior nurse. Carlos was behind him, trying to pry open an access door. They didn't see her at first. Then Anton turned, his sneer twisting into confusion. "The fuck are you doing here?" Laura said nothing. The nurse whimpered. "You gonna shoot me, lady?" he taunted. "Ain't no way you pull that trigger." Still nothing. Her hand hovered near her sidearm, but she didn't draw. She stepped forward. "Back off," he barked. The rod pressed deeper into the nurse's throat. "One more step, and I..." He never finished. In a blur, Laura closed the distance, ducked, drove her elbow into his gut, twisted his wrist, disarmed the rod, and slammed him into the floor, all before Carlos could reach for the tool bag. Carlos lunged. She sidestepped, grabbed his collar, used his momentum to spin him into the wall. He dropped with a thud, out cold. No gun, no shots, just 10 seconds of ruthless, rehearsed violence. By the time backup arrived, both inmates were zip-tied at her feet. The nurse clung to the wall, shaking. "Jesus Christ," one officer whispered. "Who is she?" Laura turned to them. Rainwater dripped from her braid. She didn't say a word. Just walked past. That night, the warden personally requested her report. She handed it in, written in tidy block letters. No embellishment, no emotion. At the bottom it read, "Use of force minimum necessary." But Blackridge was finally learning there was nothing minimum about Laura Gray. The whispers returned, but not the mocking kind. Now they were quieter, hungrier, laced with dread. She took down 2 armed cons barehanded. No backup, no hesitation. She didn't even draw her weapon. But the guards didn't know what disturbed them more, what she did or how she did it. Clean, mechanical, unbothered. Like she'd done it before, many times. 2 nights later in the locker room, Officer Brill stumbled in after a late shift, stinking of bourbon and bad decisions. He meant to grab his smokes. What he found was Laura's locker wide open, the bottom shelf exposed. That's when he saw it. A manila folder, old, edges curled from time. On its spine, USMS WHSEC Tactical Division declassified partial. The seal was unmistakable. He stared like it might bite. Inside, barely sticking out, was a photograph. Faded, black and white. A woman in tactical gear, body crouched, weapon drawn, standing over what looked like a scorched cartel safe house. Next to her, 4 men in suits. One wore the Department of Justice pin. The others were masked. But not her. She stood in full view, unflinching. The name scribbled in red marker, Gray L, code, Scythe. Brill's hand shook. He staggered back. Another guard, Cooper, walked in, saw his face. What happened? Brill only pointed. Cooper stepped close, eyes narrowing as he leaned down. Jesus? She was Marshals? Not just Marshals, WHSEC Tactical. Brill nodded. She was the scythe. Everyone knew the rumors. WITSEC Tactical wasn't just witness protection. They were surgical operatives deployed when witnesses were embedded with criminal empires, cartels, mobs, transnational syndicates. If a breach occurred or a threat emerged, they weren't evacuated. They were eliminated. Brill slammed the locker shut like it might explode. No one spoke. No one touched it again. The next day, 3 guards skipped their shifts. By Friday, the warden's office received an anonymous brown envelope. Inside, grainy surveillance footage, audio clips, timestamps, and printed chat logs, guards laughing as inmates were beaten, bribed, starved. It wasn't just damning. It was evidence. 3 staff members were suspended pending investigation. One was Officer Mackey. He never came back. And through it all, Laura Gray stood in the tower like a shadow. Bulletproof vest optional. Eyes like judgment. No appeal. Blackridge didn't sleep that weekend. Everyone felt it. The shift. Like the prison itself had changed orbit. The guards didn't joke anymore when Laura entered. No gum snapping. No side glances. Even the inmates who once roared with mockery now dropped their voices when she passed. Not out of respect, out of survival. Monday came with blood. A riot in Block C, brief, vicious, surgically timed. 3 inmates tried to corner a younger guard in the showers. By the time backup arrived, they were unconscious, lined neatly against the wall. No camera footage, no witnesses. But a folded napkin lay in the staff lounge later that night. 3 names, all circled, all matched to the attackers. At the bottom, security breach plugged, suggests psychological eval for victim. No signature, just a faint stamp, scythe. The warden read it twice, then poured a drink, alone. Meanwhile, Officer Cooper finally cracked. Paranoia ate through his pride like acid. She's here for someone, he hissed in the locker room. Not just a job, she's hunting. Brill didn't argue, because he'd seen the name underlined in the folder. One of the inmates, the man nobody remembered transferring in, a thin, clean-cut lifer named Thomas Vell. Quiet, kept to himself. He'd been cartel once, or so they whispered. A ghost from a decade-old case that had vanished from federal records. And Laura Gray was no ghostbuster. She was the cleanup crew. That afternoon, someone keyed USMS Bitch into the side of her patrol cart. The next morning, the camera above the parking yard flickered and looped for 12 minutes. When it returned, the patrol cart was parked spotless, freshly waxed. Beside it on the bench sat a folded orange jumpsuit, empty. No blood, no body, just the uniform and a printed report. Guard misconduct investigation concluded. Subject transferred to State Review Board. No one asked who wrote it. No one dared. By midweek, even the warden adjusted her tone. Her voice was careful now, like she'd remembered something buried, something with teeth. When Laura delivered her weekly rotation log, the warden didn't meet her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. Laura nodded once and left. The tower door shut behind her with a steel click. And in that silence, everyone knew this was no reform. This was a reckoning. And it wasn't over. It was around Thursday that the prison changed its rhythm. Not officially, not by policy, but you could feel it. The guards now walked straighter, quieter, like the building itself was listening. Coffee breaks were cut short. The locker room chatter died. Even the loudest mouths, the cocky lifers, the cruel staffers, grew hesitant, like schoolyard bullies realizing the teacher wasn't just watching, but writing names down. Laura didn't say a word. She never needed to. By Friday, the walls had ears. An anonymous tip led Internal Affairs to uncover a drug skimming operation within the infirmary staff, 2 nurses, 1 inventory officer. All 3 were escorted out in handcuffs. None of them saw it coming. No one spoke Laura's name. But everyone knew. The nickname started in whispers, the Scythe. She didn't swing first. She simply arrived after the rot had festered. And then she cleaned. That weekend, the rumor exploded. Someone posted a screenshot from an old DOJ memo on a prison gossip forum. It mentioned her in one line. Agent L. Gray authorized lethal clearance in operations against cartel-linked witnesses who violated compacts. The post was deleted within 6 minutes, but it had already been shared 3,000 times. At Blackridge, it spread like fire on dry hay. Yo, that's her, man! WITSEC Ops! Killed that Mexican judge with 1 shot through a stairwell window, clean. No, she's the one who ghosted out in Belize after taking down a whole compound. No casualties except targets. They used to call her Scythe because she never raised her voice, just cut. The guards fell into line, so did the inmates. One night, a shiv turned up under a young guard's bunk. The officer had once laughed about Laura's boots. The next morning he resigned without a word. In the staff room, an argument erupted between two older guards about procedural abuse in D Block. Loud, heated. Later that evening, one of them found a voice recording on their desk. Edited. Precise. Their own words. Threatening an inmate. No envelope. No explanation. But just enough to ruin a pension. He took early retirement the next day. Laura walked her rounds without flinching. Her badge clean, her belt unadorned, no weapon drawn. No complaint filed, just her presence. That was the punishment now. Blackridge wasn't just a prison anymore. It was her jurisdiction. And in her jurisdiction, every word echoed. Louder than steel, sharper than guilt. Thomasville didn't sleep much anymore. His bunk, always clean, now sat untouched by dusk. He'd pace low and slow like a predator rethinking its place in the chain. Because Vel remembered her, he just hadn't recognized her at first. Not in that pressed uniform, not with that soft face and librarian braid. But it came back in flashes. A farmhouse, a sting gone bad, 3 bodies, his last job for the Santa Muerte pipeline. She'd been there. He'd looked down the barrel of her sidearm once, tactical vest soaked with blood, her eyes dead quiet. Thought he'd died that day, until the world spun, and the next thing he knew, the cartel imploded and he was in a federal van. She hadn't killed him then. But she was killing him now slowly, without a bullet, without a word. He tried to file a transfer. It disappeared. He tried to alert his lawyer. The call cut after 2 minutes, deadline. He tried to bribe a guard. The guard was gone the next morning. Desk cleaned, badge revoked. Now he sat in his cell, watching the surveillance camera blink red, wondering if she was watching. She was. Not because she had to. Because she needed him to know. The warden, too, had started to sweat. A quiet audit was underway. Files reviewed. Logs checked. One morning she found a folded post-it note on her desk under the coffee mug. Check safe, line 40. She locked the door, hands trembling. She opened the secure safe behind her desk. Inside, nothing looked out of place, until she flipped open the warden's ledger and scanned line 40. An inmate's name struck through.
Vel.
Beside it, in her own handwriting, a note she didn't remember writing. Do not transfer, per federal order, Alg. Her skin went cold. That wasn't her handwriting. It was Laura's. But how? That night, the warden reviewed her own access logs. Someone had entered her office 3 nights earlier while she slept. No security alarm, no footage. Just a signed line in the entry ledger. Observation complete, integrity compromised. Initials LG. By Monday, no one questioned her anymore. 3 more guards resigned in silence. 2 more corrupt staffers quietly vanished from the rotation chart. And Laura? She stood at the south gate at sunrise, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug, alone. And Thomas Vel finally realized she hadn't come to catch him. She'd come to bury him. And she wasn't even sweating. It was near dusk when the south tower light flickered twice, unusual. The maintenance logs had no outages scheduled, no reports filed. Still, when Officer Paxton radioed in to check, no one answered. He made it to the tower 10 minutes later. Found the door ajar. Inside, no sign of struggle, just Laura Gray sitting in the corner chair. Uniform crisp, boots still. Her eyes fixed on the monitors, one hand steady on a yellow legal pad.
Evening, she said softly.
He nodded, trying not to shiver. Just checking. Power glitch. Her pencil scratched something onto the pad. Must be. She didn't ask him to stay. He didn't volunteer. And yet, he lingered. Because something in her stillness kept him grounded. Like if he left the room, something bigger would snap. He looked at the monitors. The feed from cell block H was pulled up, zoomed in on Thomas Vel. Why him? Paxton asked before he could stop himself. Laura didn't turn, because he slipped through once. He's quiet now, doesn't cause trouble. Still breathing, she said, calm, factual, like it was unfinished business. Paxton swallowed. You could have transferred him out, requested a black site if you're marshals. She looked up, her expression unreadable. That's what he expects. Silence stretched. Then she stood, walked past him without another word. And Paxton, for reasons he couldn't explain, saluted. Laura didn't respond. That night, Vel found a single page under his mattress. Not a threat, not even typed. Just a photo. A grainy still from 10 years ago, his arrest, his hands zip-tied behind his back, Laura standing behind him, her face unscarred, eyes a little younger, but just as cold. She was the only face not blurred. Vel stared at it for hours. When the morning came, he asked for protective custody. The request vanished. Instead, his cell lights stayed on for 48 hours straight. No sleep. No relief. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her watching from the tower, unblinking. The prison now operated like a hive, under a queen no one dared name. Emails became sharper, reports more honest, staff meetings shorter, tighter. The warden rarely left her office. Even the parole board began reviewing old misconduct cases with sudden zeal. Every policy shift silent. But in the background, Laura's handwriting. She wasn't punishing the prison. She was repurposing it. Thomas Vel didn't make it to breakfast. At 5:47 a.m., an orderly found him curled under his bunk, muttering phrases in broken Spanish, rocking. He hadn't slept, not in days. His eyes were wild, unseeing, searching for shadows that weren't there. When questioned, he didn't respond, just held up the photo again and again, fingers trembling. The guards took it, filed it, no one logged it, no one dared ask who left it. That afternoon, a federal psychologist arrived. He lasted 9 minutes with Vel before emerging pale, whispering, he's convinced she's here to kill him, not if. When? Says he sees her in dreams, hears her breathing outside the cell. He's hallucinating? The warden asked. No, the man said, his voice brittle. He's remembering. That evening, Vel was moved to solitary for his safety, they said. But solitary had cameras. And on camera, he didn't speak, didn't move. He just stared at the steel door, unblinking. Meanwhile, the warden found an envelope under her windshield wiper. Inside, 6 photos, all from inside her office, her desk, her private files, all taken from angles suggesting close, quiet access. And a sticky note scrawled in precise block letters. You'll resign quietly. Next week, no pension investigation, no press, just go. No signature, but a paperclip held a copy of her husband's sealed misconduct file. An old secret, a buried scandal. She knew that. It wasn't a threat. It was mercy. She resigned the next morning. The board accepted it without public statement. She left the keys and walked out through the front gate, didn't say goodbye. Everyone assumed it was burnout. No one guessed the truth. At 6 p.m. sharp, Officer Brill received a flash drive in his mailbox. No return address. Inside, a video file. Blurry. Nighttime. A much younger Brill holding down an inmate, laughing. Another guard kicking the man's ribs. Time-stamped, dated, undeniable. The message read, you wore the badge, not the integrity. By sunrise, Brill was gone. Resigned via email, no goodbye. 3 days later, a new bulletin was posted. Staff audit ongoing, federal review team incoming. Signed, Deputy Regional Director, DOJ. Underneath, a handwritten note appeared on the court board overnight. No one saw who left it. Some prisons were formed from the top down, others from the inside out. Blackridge belongs to neither now. Initials, LG. Inmates began behaving. Guards fell into line. Every hallway felt colder. Every light buzzed louder. Because she wasn't just watching. She was cleaning house. And it wasn't over. Not until every name on her list was crossed off. The tower was silent. From her perch above Blackridge's yard, Laura Gray watched as the last transport van pulled away. Inside sat Thomas Vel, head shaved, wrists cuffed, ankles chained. Destination, an undisclosed federal psychiatric unit. No trial, no hearing, just reassignment. The warden's chair remained empty. Interim leadership was brought in, quiet bureaucrats who asked no questions and made no demands. They kept their heads low and their logs clean. 3 more guards were gone by week's end, 2 under resignation, 1 under sealed indictment. The federal review team found everything it needed, handed over the rest to a higher court. Blackridge was no longer the same. It was still brutal, still cruel. But now it was accountable. Every corridor echoed with the memory of those who had laughed, mocked, and sneered until they didn't. Because Laura never raised her voice, never sought permission. She just corrected things. That Monday morning, a new trainee arrived, nervous, jittery, fresh out of academy. She saluted Laura awkwardly near the south gate. You the senior officer? Laura nodded. Laura Gray. The trainee looked at her, small, quiet, unreadable, and hesitated. People say you don't wear armor. I don't need it, Laura replied. Why? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the yard where inmates marched in formation, where guards walked a little straighter, spoke a little softer. Behind her, someone pinned up a copy of an internal memo. Subject line, Reforms Enacted, Ethics Enforcement Permanent. At the bottom, unsigned, were the words, Fear isn't the best deterrent, but it's faster than hope. The sun crested over the yard. And there she stood, Laura Gray, no bulletproof vest, no weapon in hand. Just her silence. Just her name. And every man in that prison knew this was no guard. This was judgment. And judgment had no appeal.